Okay, let's have a look at why fixing your gut is so essential for building more muscle and losing excess body fat. Gut health is everything. It's very rarely discussed in the bodybuilding world, the fitness world, or the nutrition world. Everybody's just talking about macros or calories or supplements. Everything starts with the gut first. So let's sort of dive into why having optimum gut health is so essential for building muscle and losing excess body fat. But of course, as I've just said, everybody really just focuses on diet, supplement, and exercise. But unless you can absorb, assimilate, and digest that food and also eliminate it efficiently, then you're going to have major issues in actually getting the results that you require from the amount of training you'll do. So, as I said, if you can't digest your food, you can't absorb it, and therefore it's difficult to build the amount of muscle that is required, providing the training is of sufficient stimulus. So, I'm absolutely staggered having looked at thousands of stool and blood tests over several years on how little attention this essential subject is given. So I'm going to give you some brief information on this. I've written a very extensive course in it, but I wanted to get this out there just to, make you a lot more aware on what you eat and are you digesting and what certain tests you can do as well to ensure that your gastrointestinal health is functioning. So first of all, I said we got to digest the food, okay? So one of the most important things that I've seen during my clinical observations over several years is a lot of people have very low stomach acid. You can see as the food comes into the stomach, you need optimum stomach acid to be able to digest and break down, especially protein and some fats as well. Carbs are mainly broken down in the small intestine. But if you've got low stomach acid, you can have a significant knock-on effect then where you end up having things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, poor pancreatic function, poor gallbladder stimulation, and you can't really digest the food optimally. Then you end up getting a lot of bloating. So we can see this whole system coming through this incredible digestive tract, okay, which I'll cover a lot more as we go through this very brief video. But the seven major functions of stomach acid, number one is to sterilize food. And then obviously protein digestion is so crucial in the stomach, where a lot of fat and carbs get broken down more in this area in the small intestine. And then also then the activation of pepsin there. And then this also stimulates especially bile and pancreatic enzymes to help to emulsify the foods. And I'm going to show what can go wrong here, which I see quite often. And then also there's something called the intrinsic factor, which helps to break down, helps us to absorb, I should say, B12. And what you can also see that can cause significant dysfunction with stomach acid is not only that you're not producing enough stomach acid, which is dependent on the mineral zinc and the vitamin thiamine, which is B1. You need them in place to make optimum zinc levels. To be honest, I very rarely see anyone with a zinc deficiency. I do see people with a thiamine deficiency on a regular basis, and there are certain blood markers which will sort of indicate on how low the stomach acid is. But also Helicobacter pylori can also cause low stomach acid. And about 40 to 50% of the Western world have got Helicobacter pylori. And that can also affect intrinsic factor as well as lowering stomach acid and causing a plethora of gut problems. So as we go through then, so one of the most important things of having enough stomach acid, also known as hydrochloride acid, is the stimulation of the pancreas to release pancreatic enzymes into the small intestine, along with then from the gallbladder and the liver to release bile in there to emulsify fats. So if you've got low stomach acid, the signal into the gallbladder and the liver and the pancreas is much more inhibited than what it should be. So already you're going to get huge problems with bloating, flatulence, inability to absorb, and as it's going through the GI tract, then it's causing more issues further down the line. So as I just mentioned, so stomach acid HCl is also necessary for the stimulation of the hormone cholecystokinin, which then helps the gallbladder to release bile for the emulsification, again in the small intestine, to help break down Not just fats, but also to help us absorb the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. So that's essential. So you can have chronic nutrient deficiencies because of the absorption or the inability to absorb these nutrients. And the pancreas is also playing a huge role in this, which we will shortly look at. So some of the major roles then on sort of poor gallbladder, sort of bile production, I should say, which I also see quite regularly. It normally indicates on a blood panel when you look at something called the sort of direct bilirubin levels. If that's high, there could be gallstones, there could be congestion in the biliary tree, which then inhibits the amount of bile going into the small intestine for the emulsifications of fat. So that's quite common. So the major functions of bile, as you can see here, is fatty acid metabolism, the excretion of wastes, also helping to destroy sort of pathogenic microbes and also blood sugar metabolism. But I think one of the most important things to look at here is signs of poor bile flow. Okay, so you can see there, it's it can go from diarrhea, sort of trapped gas, stomach cramps, weight loss, pale colored stool. Also on the sort of stool panel as well, you can also check a marker called steatocrit, which can also indicate the amount of fat in the stool. If that's over a certain percentage, then it's indicating that you are not absorbing fat sufficiently. So there's some great tests that you can also see to make sure that your gastrointestinal tract is functioning. So the stomach acid then achieves this acidic pH, which stimulates also the secretion of pepsin, which is the primary enzyme for protein breakdown. Okay, so without sufficient HCl, the stomach doesn't reach the level of acidity required to secrete pepsin, and thus protein digestion then is severely compromised. And so it's impossible. Well, it's not impossible. You're having a much more of a inhibitory effect on building muscle. You could be training your arse off and seeing no gains. There are many reasons for that, by the way, which I cover comprehensively on some of the courses that I've written. But one of them is undoubtedly, I always look at how the digestive system is functioning if somebody's having problems building muscle. And obviously you look at the hormones, but the first place to start is the digestive tract. Are we absorbing enough nutrients to provide enough building material to actually build muscles? You can see the pancreas will release these enzymes, which will help to break down proteins, fats, and carbs, but it needs a stimulus from stomach acid to do so. And some of the signs of low stomach acid is the bloating, the belching, the flatulence, indigestion, constipation, chronic fatigue because you're not absorbing and digesting the foods needed for the cells to make energy via the mitochondria primarily. And then things like multiple food sensitivities, hair loss, dandruff, poor nail, and then also poor nutrient deficiencies as well, which can be picked up with some, with some simplistic lab tests. And there are some great tests that you can do without blood tests or stool tests to see if you've got poor stomach acid. One of them is it's called a steak test. You can eat a 6-ounce steak. You can notice how you feel over the next 3 hours. If you feel tired, have gas, abdominal bloating, acid reflux, nausea, or increase in unwanted symptoms, it could be a sign of low stomach acid. If you're a vegetarian or vegan or you don't like meat, you can also do the baking soda test, where you mix 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda in a glass of water first thing in the morning before eating or drinking anything. Then drink the baking soda solution and then time how long it takes for you to burp or belch. Kids love it, children love it. Go up to 5 minutes if you have not burped or belched within 5 minutes. Then that can also be a sign of insufficient stomach acid. One of the ways to improve stomach acid as well is also like how you eat your meal. I used to think this was an old wives' tale until I studied gut health, at a high level. When you eat protein, you can eat protein and vegetables together. That's a good combination of vegetable starches together. That's good. But if you're eating a meal, for example, where there's a steak on the plate, there's some broccoli, and say there's some potatoes. Eat the steak and broccoli first, wait a couple of minutes, and then eat the potatoes. If you eat the potatoes first, it can absolutely inhibit the excretion of stomach acid because carbohydrates doesn't need stomach acid to be stimulated. And then also you also get as a side effect of that, you get a better blood sugar response as well. When you eat the protein and the vegetables first, wait a couple of minutes, then eat the carbohydrates. So that's not an old wives' tale. That is in the scientific literature. So then enzymes then are also so essential, not just at breaking down our food, but also being involved in literally every biochemical process in the body. But we're going to focus on the pancreas and the small intestine and all the enzymes that are released in there, along as with the stomach, with the pepsin to help us to break protein, carbs, and fats down into smaller molecules so that we can absorb them through usually the small intestine, in the gut barrier wall. So about 90% of our digestion will take place in the small intestine. Okay, and then from here, the micronutrients that are absorbed into the bloodstream through millions of what are known as tiny little villi in the wall of the gut. But what happens when this goes awry, okay, and this undoubtedly creates disease, and then that leads on to a plethora of other ailments that you can present with. So some of the effects then of enzyme deficiency, it's a bit like low stomach acid. So things like constipation, bloating, cramping, flatulence, and belching. So if you got low stomach acid and you've got poor pancreatic insufficiency, which I'm going to get onto in a second, it's very, very difficult not only to build muscle and lose excess body fat, but actually to function properly and to train with a lot of intensity and recover because you're not absorbing and repairing. Okay, so this chronic malabsorption can lead to a variety of illnesses. And as I say, you think about it, if your body doesn't have the basic nutritional building blocks it needs, the health and ability to recover from illness or training will be compromised. So there's something called pancreatic insufficiency. Now, I see it literally on a daily basis from the lab testing that I do. That can lead on to things like loss of appetite, weight loss, pain in the middle of the stomach, muscle cramps, again, gas and bloating, diarrhea, steatorrhea, which is then sort of too much fat in the stool, very difficult to flush, and also then you can see then muscle loss and also vitamin deficiency, especially the fat soluble vitamins. So a healthy pancreas will release these enzymes. There's a great marker on the stool panel, which I'll show you shortly, that you can test for it. And as I said, I see so many people with poor pancreatic insufficiency, which means they're not producing enough enzymes to break down the foods in the small intestine to get proper absorption. So this can then, as I said, lead to serious nutritional deficiencies. So you could be taking the best protein powders, the best supplements in the world, eating organic food, hugging your lettuce every morning and still struggling massively with health, fatigue, training, recovery, and also progress. So these are some of the signs and symptoms of pancreatic insufficiencies. So again, where you say EPI, that's exocrine. The pancreas has got two roles. Primarily is to control blood sugar via insulin and glucagon, and the other role is to produce pancreatic enzymes to help us to break down foods. So exocrine is the enzyme part of that. So you can see there the symptoms of poor pancreatic insufficiency is again diarrhea, which you've just seen, sort of the steatorrhea, abdominal discomfort, bloating, weight loss, malnutrition, trace element and vitamin deficiency, and that leads on to all this. Okay, so try training your arse off and eating the best, taking the best supplements, I should say, and good recovery, and nothing's happening. Well, check your gut health out. That's what we need to be doing. So this is the marker that I test for, which will indicate the health of the pancreas from an enzyme perspective, and it's called pancreatic elastase 1. Okay, now this is an enzyme that helps to break down fats, proteins, and carbohydrates that we eat, and it's a key part of the digestive process. So in a healthy pancreas, elastase will be passed into the stool. If little or no elastase is found in the stool, it can mean this enzyme isn't working, and then that is defined as pancreatic insufficiency, which can cause a number of health problems, including malabsorption, malnutrition, which I've just gone through, disorders that affect the ability to digest and take in nutrients. And I should add as well, it doesn't just affect your physical health, it can have a significant effect on your brain health, which has a huge requirement for a plethora of nutrients, which, if not been absorbed properly, can cause things like depression, and also degeneration of the brain. Now, so you can see the optimum range on the pancreatic elastase is actually over 500. Anything below 200 would be classed as quite severe pancreatic insufficiency. You can see in this client here, it's very, very low. So that would require some nutritional guidance. And from my opinion, and it is my opinion only, I would also recommend pancreatic enzymes quite strong as well. Then we start rolling into something known as leaky gut. The correct terminology for that is actually intestinal permeability, but we'll use leaky gut because that's what it's more permanent, sort of popularly known as. You can see here, this is the healthy part of the gut. The junctions are nice and tight. Yeah, only things that can get through there are allowed through there. And on the sort of leaky gut part, you see the junctions are open quite a bit, and I've got a couple of other diagrams to show. And then what happens then, substances can get into the bloodstream, which shouldn't be there, and that starts causing lots of metabolic problems, including not only autoimmune disorders, but also obesity as well. So we can see that these tiny junctions, as I said, are essential for the health of the organism. And then there's a couple of things that can cause these to open up, which will allow then substances which shouldn't be in the bloodstream to get into the bloodstream. Now, the substances that will do this, one of the most powerful ones is actually gluten. Okay, and you'll see this gentleman here, Dr. Aliso Fasano, who was the discoverer of zonulin, which you can see here, which when stimulated opens up this path with the gut barrier wall, which then allows substances in. Now, that's a natural phenomenon, but if it's constantly open, then that can cause, as I said, a plethora of health issues, and one of the big ones being autoimmune. So when the intestinal barrier becomes permeable, large protein molecules escape into the bloodstream. These proteins don't belong there, and the body then can start mounting an immune response. The good thing is we can test for this. This is what I love about, lab testing in the right hand. So Spanish endocrinologists, for example, they confirmed a relationship between leaky gut and also belly fat. They found that increased blood levels of zonulin, which opens the junctions between the cells of the intestinal walls, which make the gut more permeable, is also associated with obesity and insulin resistance. So what causes chronic elevated zonulin? There's a number of things, but one of the big ones is gluten. You don't have to be intolerant to gluten, but when you consume gluten, it will stimulate zonulin for a period of time, which then opens up that barrier wall. And you can see then on a stool test, you can actually measure that. I mean, I had someone very recently, and the levels were exceptionally high, so therefore with that person, I'd strongly advise, a gluten-free diet, and lots of nutrients then to repair the gut barrier wall as well. So once we start looking, as we come to the end of this very brief sort of video, which hopefully just stimulates you to look at your gut health. I could have gone into in much more depth, but I know what people's attention spans are, myself including. So I wanted to keep this just quite a stimulus. So this is a great diagram on what our gut microbiome used to be like. Okay, so we've got trillions of bacteria living within our gut microbiome, within the bowel primarily. And as we've gone through our history, it has become significantly depleted. So if we can look back here, hunter-gatherer, we would have this is just sort of showing the microbiome diversity, which is a good marker for the health of the microbiome as well. As we started moving into agriculture, no doubt was starting to become a bit more narrow on food choices. We started to lose a little bit of diversity, and then we come into the industrial food processing part then, and then, so foods are having a lot of nutrients also taken out of them. And then as we start to get more processed type food, then the gut microbiome is becoming even less. And then as we start coming up then to the present day, where you got the antibiotics and also things like C-section, also sort of formula-fed babies, then the microbiome becomes very, very sort of scarce, I should say, compared to what it was, which has a significant effect on our health. There are studies which have clearly shown a correlation between the gut microbiome and our body fat levels. Now, these two studies, for example, they found that obese individuals, they have about 20% more of a family of bacteria known as Firmicutes, and also an almost 90% less of a bacteria called Bacteroides. Firmicutes and Bacteroides make up around 90% of the gut microbiome, and they have multiple sort of bacteria which are attached to each family. So Firmicutes, they help the body to extract calories from complex sugars, and they deposit those calories into fat. And then when these microbes, this is quite interesting, when they transplanted into normal weight mice, those mice start to gain twice as much fat. They've also done this with humans as well, by the way. So this is one explanation how a microflora in our gut may have a role in our weight management. You can see also this is also tested on a comprehensive gut microbiome profile. And in this case, you can see the Firmicutes is high. So I would recommend you more sort of prebiotic foods, which I'll talk about in a second. So multiple studies then show then that obese people have a higher concentration of Firmicutes than Bacteroides, while the lean people, the Bacteroides predominate. When the diet is high in fat, and I mean like especially saturated fat and trans fatty acids and that, and I mean really high in compared to the prebiotic foods, then that can also increase the Firmicutes and decrease the Bacteroides. Okay, so in addition, then researchers have also observed then overgrowth of the Firmicutes led to also chronic systematic inflammation, which is known then to contribute to things like metabolic syndrome, things like insulin resistance or diabetes, obesity, and also potentially cardiovascular disease. Now, the question we need to ask then is what determines the perfect diet for the gut microbiome? Now, thankfully, this has been answered by Rob Knight. And this was from the American Gut Project, where it was a groundbreaking study which involved, as you can see there, 15,000 microbiome samples from more than 11,000 human participants across 45 countries. It is by far the largest database connecting the gut microbiome to diet and lifestyle, and therefore the best tool for understanding these connections. Now, here's what Knight analyzed and researchers discovered. They analyzed from the database to determine the clear-cut, most powerful determinant of a healthy gut microbiome is the diversity of plants in your diet. This was more important than age, gender, nation of origin, and even recent antibiotic exposure. So, that's why I'm a huge advocate of also ensuring, even like if you're on like a carnivore diet, which I do not agree with at all. Now, I do agree with a high protein diet with lots of plant foods in there. Yeah, and because I've studied the microbiome in such depth and human health, and this is why, it sort of confirms in a lot of the research, which I'm just sharing a fraction with you. So hopefully then you can now understand how important your gut health is to building and losing fat safely and effectively. And as I said, I mean, I love to run the stool tests on my clients along with blood testing as well to ensure that their gut health is functioning very, very healthy. And if it's not, what areas do we need to focus on to ensure that what they eat, they digest, they assimilate, they absorb it, and also they excrete it as well. So hopefully you got something out of this, and I will see you on the next video.